Okay. All right. The sermon message is Jesus gives true sight. John 9:35 through 41. In a CNN article I recently read, it speaks about an infamous mishap of NASA, which occurred on September 23rd, 1999. A project undertaken by some of the brightest minds in the fields of science. A blunder of massive proportions and great price was made because of the smallest of errors. As Mars Climate Orbiter finally made its way to the red planet for the researching of Mars, errors had occurred over the span of months would now come to a head. Upon entering the Martian atmosphere, things went terribly wrong, and the 9-month journey to the planet ended in a spectacular failure. $125 million lost in an instant over the use of differing measurements, metric versus English units. The lack of proper checks, coupled with the belief in the certainty that all was in order, made great the cost of the error. Think about it. The belief that everything was true and right led people in the wrong direction to a disastrous result, all because of trusting in an unknown error to accomplish a set goal, the orbiting of Mars. How many times do we find ourselves in similar situations such as these? We may take on a belief that we think to be right and true, and without further questioning, we go full speed in directions that do not take us where we intend to go. We're insistent that we see, yet are blind to our error. How then do we recover our sight and see the truth? How do we know that it is the truth we are seeing? The religious leaders of Jesus' day had similar problems. They were teachers and guardians of the law, yet could not see the truth in front of them. They claimed sight, yet could not see. In John 9, where we find our passage, it begins with a man born blind. As Jesus passes by the man, his disciples inquire of the blindness and whether this is a result of his own sin or that of his parents. A common Jewish belief was that sickness and sin went hand in hand, and that one could sin before birth. Jesus answered their question, but gives the deeper meaning of the reality, that this was for the power of God to be made manifest. After Jesus healed the man with his newly received sight was brought before the religious leaders for questioning. The religious leaders, the Pharisees, did not like Jesus. Jesus healed on the Sabbath. Jesus broke the Sabbath, a law that was punishable by death, although it was acceptable in certain circumstances, such as saving the life of another or circumcision. To break the Sabbath was a serious matter. Noland 2013. It did not matter that a notable miracle was done. The Pharisees thrust him out, excommunicated him, banned him from the synagogue. So fearful of being thrown out from the synagogue as well, his parents would say nothing in his defense. Why were the religious leaders so angry with Jesus? Ultimately, because this miracle testified to the deity of Jesus. Our sermon text, John 9:35 through 41, begins to address these issues. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said to him, "Do you believe in the Son of God?" He answered and said, "Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him?" And Jesus said to him, "You have both seen him, and it is he who is talking with you." Then he said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. And Jesus said, For judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind. Then some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said to him, "Are we blind also?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin, but now you say, 'We see,' therefore your sin remains." When Jesus found the man, he questioned whether he believed in the Son of God. An interesting question to ask once he had been banned from his worshiping community. But I believe Jesus was getting at something deeper. Not only had this man gained sight that he never had, but he was also seeing clearer than the Pharisees, those who were the spiritual elite of their day. The man's response, "Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him?" revealed an opening of his heart to the activity of God. How many times do we find ourselves in similar situations, faced with a truth of some sort that we believe to be true, only to be mocked and ridiculed for such beliefs? We all have encountered this on some level, from a conviction of rightness in the workplace, and that you move with integrity when your boss is not looking, or to knowing of the good to do in school, only to be teased by friends who call you a coward or scoff that you won't bend to their questionable will. There are many instances we can relate to seeing clearer than those that are taunting us. The man who was formerly born blind was seen with a clarity and with conviction submitted to God. The darkness he once knew was dispelled by the true light, the light of the world, Jesus, who stood before him. When we are face to face with the truth, how will we respond? With the same belief as this man, or will we persist in our ways that lead us away from the light? Jesus' next statement explores this very issue. And Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who may see may be made blind." Verse 39. What did Jesus mean by such a statement? Doesn't he want all to know and believe the truth, for us not to be blind, but to see as we ought? Yes, he does. But just because he desires that all know the truth and be transformed by it, revealing himself, some refuse to see even the truth staring them in the face and turn a blind eye, thereby bringing judgment. There are many these days that seek for knowledge in all sorts of places, from the universities to books, from the internet to Facebook, to looking to the past for instruction, to experiences in the present. The list goes on. But in those places, something is still lacking: true vision. What is this vision and how do we obtain it? It is a turning from our ways and our doings, which are contrary to the will of God, to him that brings light and understanding, knowledge, and truth. As Jesus said in the previous chapter when talking about discipleship, "If you abide in my word, and you are my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." John 8:31-32. The one who willfully continues to walk in darkness, refusing the light of God's word and truth, is spiritually blind. It is only through a work of God to remove the scales from one's eyes. Nonetheless, it was an orientation of the heart that was the issue, as it is for us. Even through all of this, the Pharisees would have none of it, and what could be considered as scoffing at the prospect of their inability to see, they responded to Jesus, "Are we blind also?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say, 'We see,' therefore your sin remains." Verse 40-41. The Pharisees truly believed in their own goodness and righteousness. They held the Jews to a godliness that they claimed to profess but failed to observe. The Pharisees loved prominence and to be called rabbi, teacher. They thought much of themselves and the knowledge they possessed. Yet Jesus called them blind guides, Matthew 23:24. They could not see nor understand the things of God and neglected, nullified, and despised his word through their religiosity and tradition. And if that were not enough, they were leading others to the same ditch they were falling into as well. Again, this was an issue of the orientation of the heart, either toward the light, Jesus, or away from him. In the end, the Pharisees and many others in their day thought they knew God, yet completely missed him when they were face to face. They had no desire for a Jesus who did not meet their expectations of what they believed him to be or what they thought he should have been. They not only couldn't see him, but they also refused to see him and willingly shut their eyes. It is not hard to see ourselves in a similar situation. When we claim to know, everything is fine and well, but when we are challenged on our knowing, it has an uncanny way of insulting our pride. Yes, we know, I've got this. I don't need any help. Yeah, I knew that. And the list could go on and on. We claim sight in many areas of life, but refuse to humble ourselves and admit this reality. As Paul spoke in 1 Corinthians 8:1-2, when speaking on the subject of idols, Paul says, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. In the sea of knowledge, we know very little. And when it comes to God, who is omniscient, all-knowing, we would do well to admit where we stand in relation to him and of his greatness and all he is, which our minds cannot fully comprehend. And that is fine. We don't know as we should, but we start to see with clarity those things we had not when fogged up by our pride. The dangerous reality of our pride is that it leads us in directions and places we do not want to go and ends up costing us greater than what we are ever able to pay. We believe we are headed on the right path because we have the right language or actions, yet we may be headed on a journey to disaster. Our standards for measuring what is right may in fact be wrong in God's sight. In all reality, coming to know and see the truth and to have that true vision on one's own is an impossible task. We cannot do it ourselves, even when we may have the will that we may want to. It cannot be done in our own strength. Opening the eyes of the blind is something only God can do. It is through a turning to the Lord that the eyes are open, worked through God's grace in us. When by his Spirit our hearts are open, we become receptive to the truth of the good news of Jesus. And through his power, we can begin to walk in and live a life of godliness. Ultimately, our coming to see begins with a relationship with Jesus Christ. When by the grace of God, we respond to the touch of his hands on our eyes, it is then we receive true vision. Human effort will not suffice when it comes to seeing as we ought. And therefore, a reliance on God is the only way this reality is made possible. When by his grace, our focus remains on him and his truth, we are enabled and empowered to speak truth and light to others. We can partner with God in bringing understanding to those who are blinded for various reasons and help lead and direct them on the right path. Either through the speaking of the truth in love Ephesians 4:15, when a conflict or disagreement arises, or a gentle nudge in exhorting one to walk in the way of kindness when you see hurt and pain, or even a gentle rebuke that one needs for correction, while being mindful of your own tendency for failure. The options are endless when it comes to helping bring true vision through God's power in us to our friends and family, our neighbors and acquaintances. Will you partner with me this week in finding ways to spread the true vision of God's truth for God's glory? Thank you.